and I would really appreciate it if you would stop Rob Taylor from blathering on and on.
Opinions expressed by talk show hosts, callers, or guests on the Rob Taylor Report do not necessarily represent the opinions of the hosting platform, subsidiaries, sponsors, or possibly anyone else on the planet or the known universe. From the tinfoil and lead-lined broadcast bunker on the beautiful southern coast of Oregon, it's the Rob Taylor Report. So strap yourself in. Your weekly political therapy session is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the nearly famous Rob Taylor.
Hey, Coos County. Hey, Oregon. Hello, America. East Coast, West Coast, and beyond. I want to thank you all for joining me today. I've got a very special guest who's going to be coming on talking about an important issue that is going to affect all of us living in Southern Oregon, especially in Douglas County and Coos County. This is a vital resource, not only for our Common School Fund, but this is a vital resource for natural resources. What I'm talking about is the Elliot State Forest. And I've got one of the foremost experts coming on here who's going to talk about it. And you may want to listen because they're going to be asking for comments at the Department of State Lands. We've got until July 28th to get those comments in. And I wanted Dr. Bob Zybach to come on the show to give his best description of what kind of comment you should be leaving for the state lands, the best way to affect their decision when it comes to managing the Elliot State Forest. So joining me right now is Dr. Bob Zybach. Dr. Bob Zybach, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Good to see you again, Rob.
It is good to see you. And there's been a lot happening since the last time I had you on the show, which wasn't very long ago. And I had to get you back on here because we're in the middle of a public comments period. And I had a lot of questions for you because they don't make it easy at the state land department to figure out what the heck's going on. Is that just my imagination, or do they purposely make it complicated?
They purposely make it complicated. They don't involve the public. This has all been going on behind closed doors for the better part of 10 years. So it's hard to say. The response from the public has been uniformly ignored for 10 years. They asked for public comments. This time might be different. We have a few politicians that are paying attention, and I would advise anybody that's writing into the State Land Board or the Department of State Lands to also copy your elected officials and let them know what's going on.
I would agree. Absolutely. I would include the governor on that list, which, like you said, probably doesn't have much of an impact, but I think it's important to let all of them know that we're talking to our representatives, we're talking to our state senators, and we want a solution that's a well-balanced solution for the Elliott Forest, and something that it has been talked about for a long time. And I would like to see them do it is the Giese plan. You've spoken on that here on this show. And I think I'm just going to pretty much let you start from where we left off, because where we left off, they hadn't gotten to this point where they were giving or allowing comments on the management plan. And my first question, I guess, would be, before you start, is this part of the habitat conservation plan, or is this another management plan under that plan? How does this working out? Because I'm really confused on this, Doc.
Yeah. Well, first off, the State Land Board, the governor's at the head of that, and her advisor is Jeff Huntington, an environmental lawyer, and he's the one that signed the original memorandum of understanding with the Department of State Lands when he was somehow representing Oregon State Forestry. Then they got rid of him. He's a lawyer from University of Oregon. So he went over to DSL and he did negotiations on behalf of DSL for the Elliot. Then when Kate Brown was replaced by Kotek, she hired him on as the advisor on the Elliot. So speaking to the governor, it's the same as speaking to Jeff Huntington, who devised this plan. So back to the HCPs, there are 3 of them going on now. They've been going on for 25 years. They're the way that the federal government comes in and controls your land. Basically tells you that you have to not manage part of it actively. You can't harvest much of it. And the rationale is it's for endangered species. So we have federal government doing HCPs on 3 different types of land ownerships in Oregon right now. One is the Elliot, and that's been going on for 20 years. More than 20 years, since 1996. It's cost millions of dollars. It's put hundreds of people out of work. It's cost our schools hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's created an increasing wildfire risk. The other 2 HCPs, one's for the Department of Forestry on the remaining state forest lands, now that the Elliott's not a state forest anymore. And the third one is the private forest accord, which is private lands. So the feds are basically trying to take over all of the streams and riparian-related wildlife in the state of Oregon, basically through a subterfuge, through an HCP, which thanks to Jen Hammaker and Oregon Natural Resources Institute, people are finally, after 25 years, learning how insidious this is, how damaging it is, how costly it is, and they've been kept in the dark the whole time. So now is a chance to speak out against the Elliott Plan and the HCP, but because everybody's been kept in the dark, there's a lot of homework.
There is a lot of homework, but we do have a small window because the comment period ends on the 28th. And I should have had you on here a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know why I didn't have you on here sooner, but we do have the 20 days left to get people to comment on that. And I will be pushing it out there on social media. If I may actually send your contact information to other podcasters and radio show hosts who are in the area, the surrounding area, and see if they can get you on their show as well, because people listen to different venues, and I would like to see what you're saying and what you're doing get out there, because you're one of the few people who, well, to be quite honest with you, Doc, I think you're the only one left that has common sense working on this plan. I really don't know. I listened to some of these people, and I was watching videos on YouTube a couple hours before we did the show, and some of these people, they wanted to go back to rewilding. And all I can say is all you're doing is building fuel for the next fire, really.
That's the problem. This is based on rewilding. We've got the person that's head of the BLM now. The absolute head of the BLM spiked trees in Idaho in the 1980s. The person leading fire research for Oregon State College of Forestry was a protester out of Eugene in the 1990s. So we're dealing with people that are used to be called greenies, adversaries to logging, and they are now heading these organizations or leading the research. So that is a real problem. Now we have 20 days left. So if there's other people that are interested, that would be great. There's finally a groundswell of concern about this issue. And so I think getting people's responses and involving their political representatives at this point is key. And I'll say one more thing. Even though it's Coos and Douglas County, the Common School Fund is for every school in Oregon, and that's what's been lost. It's also the HCPs are federal. So even though it's Coos and Douglas County, it's got serious statewide implications, and it's based on federal regulations and control. And those controls, I can say, as a forest scientist, are not scientific. They're strictly political.
You know, and thank you for declaring you're a scientist, because I was going to ask you a legal question, and I don't know if you know this or not, but where does the federal government, where do they get the authority to mess with state and private lands? That's what I'm not clear about. And we just had a recent Supreme Court decision that really cut into the administration, saying that the administrative law judge doesn't have the final word, that people should have their day in court, which I think is going to help out with these HCPs, to be quite honest with you. Do you think that decision will help the situation, and how do they get the authority to do this anyway in the first place?
Well, I am not a lawyer, but I am an amateur historian, and the way they got this goes all the way back to the Endangered Species Act, when they put that in to save 28 animals. Now the list is over 2,000. Then that was probably the federal government started getting involved in wilderness and roadless areas and that in 69 and 70. Then they got the Endangered Species Act in, and then the killer was the Environmental Access to Justice Act. That said that poor people, vets, and small businesses could sue the federal government for damage. And because they were small, because they were vets, because they were poor, the federal government would pay the bills if they prevailed. They would pay for their lawyers. That went through Congress probably a year or two to get it all discussed. And then at the last minute, literally within the last 5 days, for some reason, nobody knows why, the chairman interjected that 501c3s could also sue under the Environmental Access to Justice Act. So then we had the Sierra Club, Portland Audubon, Wilderness Society immediately begin flooding the courts with anti-logging lawsuits based on the Environmental Species Act, the NEPA, that they had a chance as the public to respond. And these lawsuits were successful. They started in the early 90s. People like myself said, if this continues on the federal lands, we're going to have catastrophic scale wildfires. We're also going to have massive unemployment. Both those things have happened. Both of them came true. Both of them continues coming true. And despite that, we have people still advocating for what's basically turned into a racket for lawyers and large environmental organizations to continue suing the government, putting loggers and tree planters and road builders out of work, which is really damaging to our rural communities, getting cash awards from the taxpayers who are unwittingly supporting this anti-work environment. And the other thing we've dealt with is that these fires not only put people out of work, not only killed millions of wildlife, not only cost billions of dollars, but the smoke we're learning is a global problem. But it's resulting in about an estimated 10,000 deaths a year in the United States, 5,000 deaths a year in California alone. And those are studies that have just come out recently that appear to have a lot of merit to them.
And I think that's going to, with the Supreme Court, the way they have been ruling, I think we're going to see quite a bit of that change. I think that when you take away the ability of, because the administrative law judge really is working for the administration, so there's no way you can get a fair shake in a court of an administrative court. So. And we've seen that many, many times on different situations, on education, on other projects, natural projects that they've done, energy projects that they've done. The weird thing about the law that you just quoted about paying for the legal bills of people who sue, from what I understand it, and maybe you can answer this too, if they even lose, their attorney fees are still paid, correct?
I'm not positive on that. I think it's a variable. I think it depends on the court and the decision. The main thing we know is that when that kicked in to the I'll call them nonprofits with air quotes.
Yeah.
That put tens of thousands of people out of work. It's killed millions of wildlife. It's polluted our air. It's killed our old growth. They say they're saving the old growth. And these things were all easily predictable 30 years ago, and were predicted 30 years ago. So getting back to the Elliot, they're saying now that they did some tree ring studies. That's their wildfire history. They didn't talk to me or Jerry Phillips or any other actual experts on the wildfire history of the Elliot. They came up with this simplistic tree ring study, called it history, and then they reverted to a computer model that we disproved 30 years ago. The computer model is still being used, paid for by taxpayers. It says in the Elliot they'll have a fire every 340 years, even though there's been at least a dozen major fires in the last 340 years. They're just ignoring history. They're charging taxpayers to pay for their computers, and they're coming out with really stupid responses, and they're publicizing it. You look right in the plan, and it says, "Oh yeah, the whatever model it's called says it's wildfires every 300 years, and our tree rings disprove that." Jerry Phillips disproved that 50 years ago.
That's amazing, and I can only imagine what you can do today with modern computers and the technology at your hand today to disprove that. And we're seeing that happening with even climate change models, where they're showing that the climate change models that they used are inaccurate. And what the sad part about it, when so-called scientists and other professionals do this type of thing, what they do is they erode the public's reliability and trust in those professions, in those industries. So when they hear anyone speak, immediately they're going, yeah, right, we've heard it before. And I think that's one of the things with the climate alarmist out there who, or the sky is falling type crowd, that eventually there's the next generation or so are just not going to believe them. You know what I mean? They're just not going to believe these people, but they're not going to believe anyone. You know what I mean? It just seems like there's no reliability in any information that we're getting out there. It's all fake news, so to say.
I think that's a real problem, and it's not the next generation. This has been going on 35 years. What's happened is it's not only ruined our trust in scientists and our trust in media. The recent Biden stuff kind of emphasizes that, but it changes the way we're teaching science. So science now is indoctrination process. People are going to college, and they're the second and third generation, and they're being told that this existential threat is happening to the universe, and they've got to go out there and change the battery in their car or something. Not cut a tree to store carbon. It's all a racket. It's been easily disproven for the past 30 years. None of their projections have turned out to be accurate, and yet they persist. They continue teaching this. The Elliott Plan is a perfect example. There's this dumb computer model from the early 1990s that is just totally off base, and yet they're citing it as if it's a reliable source, and we're paying for it as if that's a reasonable investment.
And the sad part is they're calling it climate change. And anyone who knows history and the stages of how the earth was developed, yes, climate changes, but it's not as erratic, I think, as they make it now. I mean, when the earth was young, it was changing and evolving much more rapidly than it is now. It's kind of solidified and slowed down. And the forest, the Elliott forest, the forest itself has been there, thousands of years? We had Indians there. So to say that there was climate changes, even though it's hot right now, Dr. Zybach, it's really hot out here in Bandon, which is unusual, but we have these type of days. But I imagine in the early 1900s, 1800s, going back to year one, they had hot days. You know what I mean? And they had very cold winters, and it just we're a revolving rock orbiting a fireball, and it just seems like there's a lot more at play than what a couple of guys cutting down trees could do to the climate.
Yeah, they can't do anything. That's just nonsense. It's just a political control issue. The climate is a 30-year average. My dissertation was on 500 years of Western Oregon wildfire history. So I looked at the climate very closely. A member of my committee was George Taylor, who was the Oregon State climatologist. He wrote a book about Oregon's climate. He wrote another book about Oregon's weather. So the weather changes every hour, every day, every season, but the climate is a 30-year average. So the climate has been about the same for thousands of years in Western Oregon. It hasn't changed a bit during historical time. We had a drought in the 1930s. We had major floods in 1861. We had the Columbus Day Storm in 1962. We had the landslides in 1996. These things happen. They're extremes, but they're not the climate. The climate is an average of all these events. So if you have real hot days, you have real cold days, and the average might be fine. So it's that's what people are missing. If you have 1 foot in a bucket of ice and another foot in a bucket of boiling water, your average temperature might be comfortable, and that's the climate.
Right. That good analogy. So one of the reasons I wanted you on here is that we always get asked, the public always gets asked to answer or submit comments. And the trick they will do, and they just did this for the windmills, and they asked us to submit comments, but any comment that didn't actually relate to the exact questions and criteria of what they were asking were not submitted, or they didn't keep those comments. So when you made your comment, you had to do it in a way so that you could so that they would categorize it as fitting their criteria of what they were asking about. And I forget the agency that was just dealing with the windmills, but I had to look at exactly what they were asking us, what criteria it fit, and then I've had to submit a comment to that, which, to be quite honest with you, with a guy who just has a high school education, it gets a little complicated to answer those questions to fit that criteria in a way where they understand I'm opposed to the project. I'd rather it be done some other way, and try to fit that in there while still meeting their criteria. So how does that fit with what they're asking for now? How would you tell people to respond to the Oregon Department of State Lands with this latest public comment request?
Well, obfuscation, like you're saying, is exactly right. They have lawyers write these up, and then you're assuming that they read them, but I've learned that they don't. What they're doing is they're checking off a box. NEPA says, okay, you have to involve the public. And they say, how do we do that? Ask a lawyer. Hey, write up this really complex thing, send it out to the public, give them 30 days to respond, then take all of their responses, run them through a scanner, put it online, and say, okay, we consulted with the public. Then they totally ignore it. That has been the record for many years. And when the spotted owls first started in the 1970s or 80s, as a reforestation contractor, and I wrote in a response, and I got a really nice reasoned response back. I had a high school education then. That shouldn't have any bearing on it. We should be able to, in plain English, which is the law, understand what it is they're asking. And then as taxpayers and US citizens, we should be able to get a coherent response to what we've written. Some indication that they're actually reading it, responding to it, and hopefully integrating it. But we don't get that. We had 23 responses, including 5 of us personally testified, 6 elected officials, 4 nonprofits at the last state land board meeting, which the governor heads. And we asked simply that they postpone for 60 days this release of the Department of State Lands proposed budget, where they were asking for $4 million to buy a bunch of people and sell some carbon credits. So we had 23 specific requests, and we were tolerated while we talked. And then when it was all over, they totally ignored everything that was said and written and voted very quickly, 3-0, to accept without any public review or further review the proposal for $4 million and continue with carbon credits. So that was only a month or two ago. So right now, I think you write into the Department of State Land, and you, as you say, copy all the elected officials. You can copy the governor, but you might as well just send it to Jeff Huntington.
Okay. I've got your response. It was your summary up on the screen there, and I read, and when I say I read through it, I looked through what I found was the 365 pages of forest management plan. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Rob, that's just a rough draft. That was just for background. So we haven't released it yet or finished writing it. So it's probably better not to share it at this point.
Oh, I apologize. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I will get that corrected. But let me go ahead and get that off the screen, and let's talk about the 10 points that you made during that summary, if you would want to go over those, if you think it's proper to do that at this point.
Oh, sure. That's why I sent it. The problem is it's a draft summary. Dr. Dave Sullivan, proposed that I collaborate with him to write a scientific peer review of the research forest plan, because they claim to be a research forest. So those 10 points were the 10 topics that we could approach scientifically. And so that's the reason that it's just not ready for review yet. We haven't finished polishing the summary, and each of those 10 points is in varying stages of completion. But we hope to have that in on time. We hope to discuss it with people such as yourself, so that people are aware that there's several strong scientific arguments against the plan, and that the research they're proposing to do is pretty much really expensive and totally meaningless. And that's why we come back to the Giese plan, which pays for itself, produces jobs, and produces information of value to small landowners and other forest managers.
Is there any, I mean, because I'm just not up there, is there any logging going on in the Elliot Forest, or has that been completely eliminated? Is there anything like that happening?
No, they're barely maintaining some main roads. There's 550 miles of roads and trails. Their approach is to let those dissolve, to abandon some of them over time, to create a de facto wilderness on the western boundary of the Elliot for, 40,000 acres or something. And then that reserve creates a increasingly risky firebomb to the communities from Coos Bay to Reedsport, everything to the west of the Elliot, because the major fires go on east winds, to let all that fuel build up into areas that used to be berry fields and prairie lands and scattered trees, is creating just a real wildfire risk to those communities.
I just watched a meeting with our county commissioner here. Rod Taylor had gone down to speak with the county commissioners in Curry County. And one of the ideas that they had came from the county of Navajo, Arizona, where the county itself passed an emergency saying that because the federal government is no longer managing the land properly, it has created a danger for the people of the county. And so they passed an ordinance allowing them to go up there and take down some of the timber to create fire breaks, and so that they could use to sell to pay for what they were supposed to be allowed to pay for. And what they were going to use it in Curry and Coos was for the ONC lands. I'm thinking, and I was going to present this to Rod Taylor again, that he may want to talk to Douglas County and do the same type of thing with the Elliot Forest. If they're not going to manage it, then they're creating a danger, which is a hazard to the people of both counties. We should have some legal ability to go in and either pass an emergency and start cutting down some trees, or they should have to compensate us, or find some way to protect us. I don't know. You can't really compensate people dying in a fire. I mean, we've seen what fires have done. You just can't compensate people for the damage done there. But the counties are going to try to, I'm going to encourage them to try to do the same thing with the Elliott Forest. And I don't know how this is working out because I'm not a lawyer, but it would be interesting considering, and I go back to that Supreme Court decision where they have taken away the authority of the administrations to have their own law judges without them going to an actual court. So I don't know if you've heard of any of this.
Well, I'm familiar with a little bit of it. I just wrote a editorial for the Rogue Valley Times on this very issue of the environmentalists creating lawsuits to stop logging. And we're talking about the mortality. 5 and 10,000 people a year is significant. That hasn't been recognized before. But BLM just had a proposal in Southwest Oregon, 2 of them, to do that very thing, to create a fire break, create jobs, pay for itself, active professional forest management, scientifically based. And it was shot down by a judge that had no idea, no scientific basis for making that decision. So here we have right now suits going on in Oregon, lawsuits that aren't being challenged. Oregon Wild, Cascadia Wildlands, Portland Audubon, they changed their name because I guess Audubon had slaves, but they should do it out of shame for all of the suits they filed and all of the wildfires that are followed. They've really done significant damage to Northern California and to Western Oregon over the last 30 years.
The nice thing, it's not nice that there's some of those lawsuits that are losing, but if our side loses, the people who want responsible management of the forests to be completed, if our side loses, at least we can appeal it all the way up to the Supreme Court if we can get the Supreme Court to take it. But I think that if you could get a case to them, it would be just absolutely a new wedge against counties who are having their natural resources used against them. And that's what it seems like to me. They're using these natural resources against us. The windmill thing with what they're doing to the fishing industry, what they're doing with small farms, and especially the dairy farms. It just seems like rural America is under attack. And I'm not sure what we did other than provide them some of the best food they could eat in those big fancy cities. You know what I mean? It makes, what's getting her a little crazy.
Well, 2 things there. One on the appeals, and you're right. I think the county level is the exact level to take it, because at the state level, one thing that's really pissed me off is these lawsuits against the Elliott were filed in 2012 and verified in 2014, and there's really been no logging going on for 5 or 6 or 7 years, and it was just ripe for an appeal, and the state did not even bother to appeal. They got a stupid decision to stop logging over thousands of acres of land, putting thousands of people out of work, and they said, "Oh, okay, we want to save that seabird." So that part is bothersome. The other part, what you said, I've been making a joke for a lot of years that if North Korea or China or Russia was trying to destroy rural Pacific Northwest, destroy our wealth, which is our forests, destroy our rural industries, which are the people that feed and clothe and house us, they couldn't do any better than DC. Without being responsible, hiding behind the scenes, using regulations and lawyers and DEI employees posing as foresters. They've been able to major billions of dollars worth of destruction, kill thousands of people, kill millions of wildlife, pollute the air, put people out of work, ruin our industries. And now they're proposing to do more. And people are asked to write in a note about what they think about that. And it's been going on for 30 or 35 years, and it needs to stop.
You know, the insults, and it's really insulting because you're an incredibly intelligent man who's done a lot of work on this, and it's like the only way they would take you seriously now or listen to you is if you put on a wig and a dress and called yourself Dr. Barb Zybach. And I think that would be the only way they would go, oh, well, I'm sorry. He's a DEI representative. And so whatever he says goes. And it's sad that we're in the state that we're in. Once again, I've never imagined this is where we were going as far as a country. And getting back to the Elliot Forest, they're really putting our lives at risk and their lives as well, because I don't know how, like I said, they plan on eating. I guess they're going to eat those bugs that everyone talks about. You can live off of grubs and grasshoppers, and it's scary what they're thinking. But I want to go to point one in the summary that you haven't released, but you plan on releasing. And number one is the economic value. Can you go over that for me?
Sure. The economic value of the Elliot was estimated to be $500 to $700 million 30 years ago. And then they came in with the HCP. And they spent an enormous amount on doing an inventory on the Elliot, and they did not include all of the land they guessed that the HCP would use. So they were making estimates on what they thought the federal government was going to do, and they took all of that land and they valued it at zero. So getting an HCP in there is worth exactly nothing, according to the experts. Then they took the 550 miles of road in which millions of dollars were spent, which are a key part of the access to the Elliot for recreation, for research, for management. And it's a cultural resource. It's got historic value. And they ignored that. They gave it zero value. So two of the most valuable things in the Elliot, they valued at zero. And then they said, okay, so it's only worth $220 million now, 20 years later, after the trees have grown 20 years, after the roads have been maintained 20 years, it is now worth $500 million less. So we did some estimates on their numbers, and nobody has been able to estimate the value of the timber, 3.5 billion board feet, and come up with a value at any less than $1 billion or $2 billion. That range is what 80,000 acres of mature second growth and mature plantations is worth on the market. So for the Common School Fund, they've got $1 billion asset. So they reviewed it again based on these new plans. And they evaluated the land at $99 million. So the government, Kate Brown, said, you know what? We're going to have the taxpayers pay themselves $220 million, and then that will remove the obligation of the Elliot to produce an income for the Common School Fund. So all of this is happening behind closed doors. All of it is highly debatable. The public did intervene, me and a few other people. And like you said, I'm one of the last because the others have grown old and died. Wayne Giese and Jerry Phillips and Bill Hagenstein and those people aren't with us any longer. David Gould, and they were fighting this fight. It's like, wait a minute, we know this land, we know its history. You're just making crap up, and you're shoving it down our throats, and you're putting our people out of work, and you're ruining our schools and parks. And they said, oh, okay, put in your written comment, and we will put it in the cupboard. And that's been the response for 30 years, basically, but especially the last 10.
incredibly insane. And then it takes me to your second point, income, which is what they're going to use as income, is carbon credits, which is really a fairy tale mitigation process. It's just absolutely ridiculous how they come up with this idea. And if I would let you explain that.
Well, carbon credits is just this another racket in which they say, okay, if you don't cut a tree, that will help the climate of the world. And therefore, we can find an investor who will pay you money not to cut that tree. And then that will give them a credit so that they can burn a gasoline-powered automobile. That will give them the right to produce some carbon somewhere else if they pay you not to cut your trees. So highly speculative. The carbon markets that they set up 25 years ago basically ended and gone broke. Some of the countries like Germany that invested into them are not doing well. The very good news is Oregon State, after 4 or 5 years, millions of dollars, hundreds of people unemployed, came to the same conclusion that these carbon credits that they're pushing at us to stop logging are really debilitating to the Elliot, and they're highly speculative. They're controversial for good reason. The Elliot's dynamic. I named the landslides, the floods, the wildfires. They're not going to store carbon for any length of time. And if you think storing carbon in an 80,000 acre forest is going to have the slightest impact on the climate, you're either a true believer or you're a criminal. It's just so stupid that people, if they're given the facts, would go, no way. That's like adding salt to the ocean and saying you're increasing the salinity or something. It's no way. It's the climate is too massive. There's too many variables, and to think that storing carbon in some trees anywhere is going to affect the world's climate is the politest word is stupid. And yet we're falling for it. We're spending billions of dollars on it. We're putting people to work because of it. We're polluting the air and killing wildlife because of it. So this has just got to be revealed. And this is one of the major things we can argue with on the Elliott plan. It's like, no, don't do carbon credits in lieu of actual work.
Right. And I've seen this happen in many other places, and they push it on they actually have cities and other governments trying to buy carbon credits, which, like you said, is just using tax dollars to destroy an economy in another area. The triad, what did it say? The triad research design, Jerry Franklin's critique. Could you go over that?
Yeah, they're going to do a triad research design. Getting back to the HCPs, and it ties in with the triads. When when the state put out the plan that the environmentalists opposed in 2012, Wayne Giese and I had some influence on it, and they had 13 or 15 sub-basins. So they were managing it on the basis of 13 or 14 different combinations of creek basins. When Wayne and I looked at it, we said, okay, they're assuming there's going to be an HCP. We're going to assume that people are going to come to their senses. So we had 25 sub-basins, 25 different creeks. And the research we called for was because every basin is different. It has different soil, different vegetation, different wildlife, different slope, different aspects to sunlight. Every one is different. And they change day to night and through the seasons. So we said there's 25 different ones. Let's look at those independently, and let's do the research by paired watershed studies. So we take 2 adjacent watersheds and study them. And so that was ignored. And instead they went for the HCPs. Now we were up to 25 polygons, up from 13. The HCP has 9,000 polygons. The state took our work basically and turned it into 125 polygons from the 25. Then on the 125 polygons, they combined them all into 6 different colors. So they said basically, even though we've got 125 different sections, there's only 6 different variations. And then they took those 6 variations and turned them into 3 acronyms. They said, okay, one's a CWE or an ASA or something or other, and we're going to do a partial cuts on those, and we're going to do no cuts on these, and we're going to let the snags grow everywhere else and the dead wood build up because we're creating this condition that we think that marble murrelet's like.
Right.
If people playing on computers that have no forestry experience that come up with this type of thing. So the Triad program, Jerry Franklin, they put it out in 2019. We're going to use the Triad. It takes a bunch of these polygons. It assumes they're stable over time, that you're not going to have a wildfire, you're not going to have a windstorm, you're not going to have a landslide. In other words, you're not going to have reality. You're going to have a Swiss cuckoo clock, and it will follow all these polygons, and we will monitor them at an enormous cost. And with that, we will get information that has absolutely zero value to other forest managers. They're saying it has value, but only value if you believe that dead wood and snags and wildfires are a acceptable future for a forested area.
So you just covered number 4 too with what your answer there. So, but they're using this mumble jumble because it sounds like mumble jumble to any person, and anything that comes through the government that sounds like nonsense, you just assume it's nonsense after what we've experienced the last several years. And I just don't know how they can take your work, which is very understandable, which is very readable, which is, it's black and white. It's very easy to read and understand. And then they create this nonsense. It was a 365-page plan. And to be honest with you, I was having a real hard time reading it. It was like they use English, but I don't know if they are actually putting them in the right order. So it was a little odd that to put that out and then ask people to respond to it, because anyone who reads that would be even more confused than ever before. Just your description of what you talked about. And that, like I said, that was number 4 of one of your points. Number 5, and this is really, to me, a huge one, is the cultural landscapes and the 550 miles of roads and trails and such in there. And they're eliminating our ability to get in there and actually do archaeological type of digs and stuff like that, because they're going to have to, you're going to have to hike up into the middle of nowhere if there are no roads to get to them. And to do an archaeological dig, you have to have a lot of equipment. And so we're really eliminating what I thought the left wants all the time, to discover ancient cultures and to figure out how they lived. When I was a Boy Scout out in the desert in New Mexico and on West Texas, we used to love to go out and do dinosaur hunt, hunt for dinosaur bones and stuff. And, if they didn't allow it in the desert, it's easy to get to it because you just drive over the desert, but you can't do that in the forest. So, tell us a little bit about how this plan is going to destroy our ability to find out more cultural and agricultural past of this forest.
Well, cultural resources, people typically think archaeology, but the federal government has made it clear for a lot of years, and I got a 4-year degree on this topic, cultural resources and cultural resource management. Anything over 50 years is considered an historic resource. If we look at the cultural landscape, that's the appearance of the landscape from a landing or a ridge line or someplace. Half of the Elliot, not quite half, is plantations. Those are totally unusual formations. They're unprecedented in Northwest forests. There's now the other part of the cultural landscape is the roads. There are Indian trails on the Elliot. These were developed into pack trails. These were developed into logging roads, and types of logging that were done in the 1950s, over 50 years ago, cat logging on steep slopes, which isn't allowed anymore, did follow old Indian trails, and those cat roads are historic resources. They're part of the cultural landscape, and they're excellent for hiking down to fishing spots or hunting or running a mountain bike down. So these roads are really important. The plantations are important for a different reason. When you put in a grid of even-age Douglas fir, you not only create a fire hazard, but you're only trying to do two things: create jobs and fiber. So you're planting through huckleberry patches, their cultural landscape patterns from the past, camas prairies, strawberry fields, boomer colonies. So you're planting through areas where there's usually sunlight, which means songbirds and butterflies and wildflowers, and you're covering them over with Douglas fir on a grid. And that creates a monoculture. It reduces biodiversity. It increases wildfire risk. They were put there for one reason, that was to log them off and run them through a sawmill. So now what do we do with those 40,000 acres? They're saying, oh, well, we just give them Latin names, we give them acronyms, and we start speaking in metrics. And then we assume that everybody will understand, like we do, that these will somehow evolve into critical habitat for an owl with spots. And just to keep the owls with bars away, we will shoot them and everybody will be happy. Where's the money coming from to do this crap? And why are they not acknowledging that these plantations will not develop into whatever type of critical wildlife habitat they're claiming is critical and that we should be paying billions of dollars for? It doesn't add up. They've been basically running this racket for 35 years. They've been successful. And maybe with the Supreme Court, maybe with some enlightened legislators, we can finally start to change course on this.
One thing that really blew my mind, you talking about, and I never thought about this, was someone who goes up there to ride a bike path. You're saying that that bike path could have been used or has been used by Indians going back, what, 1,000 years, 2,000 years? That's mind-boggling to think that that's happening, that you can go do that right here in Coos County, go ride those Indian trails.
I've been trying for more than 10 years to get even fairly minor funding from the state. They're not interested in finding out more, to do more research on where those trails are located. We can go through the General Land Office surveys. I've done it for the Coquille tribe 10 or 12 years ago, and for the South Umpqua and other points in the Cascades. You can go back and you can recreate where those Indian trails were, and you can recreate past environments. But that contradicts their computer models. So they've got millions of dollars for people that you don't know playing on computers, and they don't have any dollars to do actual research, documentary research on where these trails are. But yes, people were there. People go along ridge lines, along riparian areas. They didn't have HCPs. They had campsites. They had swimming holes. They're right. People. If there's a dead wood laying around, they built campfires with it. It's ridiculous what they are now claiming was the environment, and claiming that people were somehow able to subsist in the environment that they're trying to create. It's just totally out of whack with history, and it should be out of whack with our future.
Has any of the Indian tribes, are any of them suing for getting this land back into their domain, or are they at least suing, considering suits or some type of legal action to at least get those trails back? To me, it seems like those trails, that's just phenomenal. That, you know, so many people are into bicycling and mountain biking. It just seems just that would be something that we could all agree upon. And if the state isn't going for it, it seems like the Indian tribe, which is really a federal agency, let's just face it, they're a federal agency now. They have a good amount of power. that they should step up and demand that those passages be taken back to what they were when their ancestors roamed the land. Anything from that?
Yeah, the Elliot is the ancestral land of the CT Clusie, the lower Siuslaw, Coos, Hannes Coos people, and lower Umpqua. Let's see, they're not Kuish is what they're called now. They were Kilowatsets for a while. So and they're all basically one tribal organization at this point. And I wish they would do exactly what you're saying, file suit and look at the management. I've talked with them in the past, and the cultural ancestry on the land involves logging and road building for generations of Indian people.
Right.
That was a lot of employment and stuff. So traditional uses of the land in living memory and for the last several generations is active management of our forest lands. Firefighters, loggers, timber fallers, road builders, truck drivers, all Indians for generations. So looking at that, I think a lot of them are getting bought off with lip service. They the government deals with 2 or 3 tribal representatives. They give them some kind of spiritual opportunity. They say, okay, you're going to co-manage under our rules, which isn't co-management. It's like we put your name on the letterhead, but we call the shots.
Right.
And they talk about indigenous knowledge, like we're integrating TEK, and those are academic terms that are meaningless. It's saying that, okay, either indigenous knowledge is genetic, so it's racist, which isn't, it's ridiculous to think that people know what people were doing 500 years ago, whether they're descended from them or not. Indigenous knowledge should be living memory. It should be the people living within a sub-basin or basin, within a river basin or a creek, some basin. The people that live there know it better than anybody. Their living memory. The people that live there the longest know it the best. Maybe the people with ancestral ties to that particular area may know it better if they've continued being involved in the environment, or maybe not. So when the Indians were here, they were all over that land. They had trails up and down every ridge line. They had trails along every creek. Those areas were picked clean of dry wood. A lot of those areas were maintained for huckleberries or other openings. So to say that they're involving the tribes, I think they're doing the same thing they're doing with our college students. They're indoctrinating them. They're paying lip service to them, but they're not giving them the facts.
And to validate that point, the tribes, most of them here are opposed to the windmill projects that I've mentioned a couple of times. And now you can see where BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, is coming in and literally trying to bribe the tribes with our tax dollars to break them away from the counties who are also opposed to the project. And I've seen that happen on other projects that they have done. And it's, and and nothing against American Indians. I think they're a great people. I think that we need to learn their culture, to respect what we've got here in our country. They were the first peoples here, and the way we treat them now is like a stepchild. And like you said, that you see the federal government, yeah, we hear you, but we're pretty much going to do whatever we want anyway. And and it just infuriates me, because as a taxpayer, I'm paying for them to treat another group of people like crap. And it just ticks me off, Bob. It infuriates me, because I guarantee you, like you said, they have politics at play. They got people at the top who are getting, they're getting their wheels greased, and the people below, they're not being heard. And when the government says we want to protect your culture, really they're not. They're doing just the opposite which government does all the time. You know what I mean? And it's infuriating, Bob. It really is.
They make them wards of the state. And what you're saying, a good example would be Warm Springs. They're giving them $3 million a year to co-manage the land. Well, how come there's so much poverty on the Warm Springs? Well, if they're getting all this money from the federal government, they're co-managing billions of dollars worth of assets. That's because they're not allowed to do anything. And so they become like a lot of people in rural areas, like a lot of people living on sidewalks, like a lot of people crossing into the country illegally. They become wards of the state. And so they're like modern day slavery. We are taking these people, taxpayers are paying out money to them, most of us unwittingly or not wanting to. And it's keeping them in a condition of dependency, and in this case, on the federal government. So what you're saying about BOEM sounds exactly right. That's the strategy. Pay off a few members of the tribe that are in a position to make decisions on behalf of all the tribal members. And I would say another thing. The people that were here when the Europeans arrived and Africans arrived and the Chinese arrived have all been dead for centuries. The people that are descended from those people are also descended from Africans and Europeans and Chinese. We've got a mixed culture here in the United States, and it's really good that our tribes keep their cultures. And it's really good that we give them autonomy to land, to manage as a culture. That goes back to agreements that the government made 100, 150 years ago. All those people are dead. So we've got the written word, we've got the written agreements, but to have spiritual services and $1 million backdoor payments going out in lieu of actual control or actual say, it needs to be exposed.
It's almost like we don't learn from histories. In every treaty almost that ever been made with the Indians was broken, and now we're saying, oh well, now that you broke all those treaties, why don't you give us a habitat conservation plan, because you'll live up to that, right? You know, and sometimes I guess we get what we deserve because there's not enough of us, and I say this as a collectively as a people. There's just not enough of us saying, wait a minute, you've lied to us before. So why would we trust you now? And I want to continue with this, but I got to get a sponsor on here real quick who he works over at Tom and Gigs. He's the owner of Tom and Gigs. And I want to bring him in here for just a second to promote his business, because I got to pay the bills too. So just a second, I'll keep you on stage, and I'm going to bring on Tim. Tim, how you doing, man?
Super, man. Just got sat down. Boy, that was quick.
That was quick.
Yeah. Now I got to think off my, I don't have a teleprompter, man. I'm in trouble.
I know. Don't go off script too much, because, you know,
yeah, and so on.
You know, Tim, we're talking about the Elliot Forest, and have you ever been up to the Elliot Forest, gone fishing, any recreating up there?
It's been a while, be honest. I mean, this is my little area right here in Empire is about as far. I don't hardly get out of town, man. I'm a slave.
You are a slave to your business. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
But I got to pay my bills, man. I got to pay my Rob Taylor report bill. Hey,
gotta stay working, man. Stay working.
That's right.
I was telling everyone the other night on the show, I said, boy, if you can get into Tom and Gigs, because the last time I was there was about $2 million of pickup trucks surrounding your building. I mean, if you add it up, I think there were at least 12 they look almost brand new trucks around your building, and I'm sure they were getting, you know, side rails and light bars and all that good stuff. But
yep, amen to all those guys. Yeah, exactly. I mean, amen to all the people that can afford new trucks. That's awesome. You know, everybody still wants to make it their own rig, you know, whether it's tires and wheels or a leveling kit, or, you know, maybe they want to do something with their bumpers and put a winch on it, or lighting, you know, it's a big deal. I mean, a lot of the guys that have money now are older, like me. I don't have no money, but I'm older. But
I'm with you.
But anyway, you know, they have the opportunity now to have a truck they've always wanted. And it's pretty cool to see that come to fruition, and they show up and it's all done. They're pretty stoked. So it's pretty cool. And the new trucks are awesome. They're incredible vehicles, I don't know. They're $100,000. I don't know if they're that incredible, but
That's what I was saying. I mean, I'm sitting here. Well, that has to be 100,000. That's at least an 80,000, and there's like 10 of them here. I'm like, wow, we've got a lot of money going on over here at Tom and Gigs. And you're in the Empire neighborhood. So I was like, oh boy, maybe I shouldn't be announcing this. I don't know.
Well, we try to get them in and out here as quick as possible, and usually when people have to leave their rigs, at least if it's overnight, they're all put inside the shop. So, you can't trust anything around here anymore. You used to leave our keys in the cars and doors open and all that kind of stuff. Can't do that no more. Just the way it is, I guess. But anyway, we have a welcoming mat for them folks. It's called Smith and Wesson mat. They'll hit the mat.
Yeah.
If we have to use those sort of things. Hopefully we don't. But I'm not against that, because to me, you're threatening my life and livelihood if you're invading my home or my shop or threatening my guys here. I think we have the right to defend ourselves. So,
and you guys have been threatened. I remember there was a story about a guy with machete threatening your guys. Wasn't there a guy out back threatening you guys with a machete one time? I remember that on the radio.
Yeah, it's been a while back, but that's true. And we've had a lot of other things, and you got to take those threats seriously. We don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
How do I know if he's just a blowhard or if he's really a hardcore want to get it on and take somebody out guy? I mean, who knows? So I'd say if they get it within 5 feet or less, you gotta drop. You got to either run for your life or, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not one for running. I'm tired of that stuff. But it's just like LGBTQ. Let's get Biden to quit. Remember, that's what it stands for. We don't stand for the abomination that they stand for with their rainbow crapola. So I love hate mail, and I love people who listen to the show that hear that. So we'll just pray for those people to change, and you leave those kids alone. And why don't they have the kids? Get the kids out in the Elliot Forest, have a good time, learn what forest is about. Down in Apache County in Arizona, they're logging down there, aren't they? They're building mills. What the heck is going on? Well, they did get 2 new commissioners in Curry County, and they're willing to listen to, I won't say her name, but she knows who she is out there, and you do too. They're going to present that to the commissioners, and I guarantee you they'll probably, things have to move along. It's going to be just like Apache County. They're going to start using the land instead of burning up the land. Make that lumber out of those logs instead of just a bunch of cinder sticks. It's kind of sad. So we need that revenue here. That's our revenue for this area. It's just like fishing. If those people loggers aren't working, fishermen aren't working, we're probably out of business.
Right.
Those people make good money, and that's, thank God they do. It's good family wage jobs, and we need those people in the community. And I mean, it's just if we don't have that, it's why are we here?
They want us to depend on tourists, but they don't understand that during the winter, between October and March, the weather is crap. No one comes out here. It's just you and me and all the other people who live here. And if we don't have people who have good jobs, our businesses are going to go to crap, because, fish and wildlife are great. Tourism is great, but they don't drink coffee in the wintertime. You know what I'm saying, Tim? It's
absolutely. I mean, the snowy plover and the spotted owl are doing better than the humans. I mean, if they worried about us and our livelihoods and our welfare as much as they do the dang animals, which are great, that they're important, sure, but they're not humans. So what about our, situation? That's our politicians just want to ignore us, and I don't know how do we get their attention through how do we hold them accountable? How do we get them to change? Is it we need a occupation of the state capitol or the Coos County?
I don't know. Maybe what we need to do is we need to get all those truck drivers that were at your store. We need to get all these people. We need to head up to the Elliot, and we need to do some big rally of support for getting the Elliot back into good shape, getting the Elliot back to a safe managed forest. And, the Giese plan is great because he understood the cultural value. He understood that it needs to be a working forest. There needs to be recreation. There needs to be conservation. All of that can happen.
Right.
And yet they're ignoring common sense for ideology. And that's really what they're doing. They're pushing an ideology that really I don't even think existed unless you're talking about an ideology before mankind. It's almost like we're the evasive species and they want to get rid of us. I wish they would start with themselves. So
Right. Well, they call us extremists. They're the extremists. They don't want any human activity in these areas. They don't want you would even walk there, let alone hunt or fish or log. So that's a bunch of bull. That's like what Agenda 21 and now Agenda 30, whatever you want to call it. It's an extremist, greeny, weenie movement that we can't just be in your little habit trail in your city and you just stay out of the woods. No. And where did the federal government get the authority to own all this land? How do they own all this land?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, Dr. Bob explained that earlier. You're going to have to go back and watch because he did explain that.
They know more than I do. I just know enough to get in trouble, but we have a right to be on that land. It's not just a privilege. That's the people's land. I mean, it's we the people, right? In the Constitution.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be the tail. We need to be the head, and instead of getting whipped around by these people. So maybe we can right the ship. I hope we can. And I guess I was going to have a quote of the day here, but it says, knowledge is no guarantee of good behavior, but ignorance is a virtual guarantee of bad behavior. So, if we don't get our act together, we won't understand got to understand what's right, what's wrong, what these people are doing, and hopefully, and call your commissioners or call your congressmen or your senators and all your legislators. I mean, if we were all to do that and then bombarded with it, they'd really realize, hey, if I don't straighten up here, I'm not going to get reelected. I better start towing the line and doing the right thing.
Right.
And it's too, we had a great party for Matt, a giving and going away party. It was great. It was really nice to be around all like-minded people. It's definitely a breath of fresh air, and we had a great time. Good pizza, and Matt will be back someday, I have a feeling.
Yeah, I think so too. And quickly, what's your number? Where you're at? Where can people get to you?
Get out. You can get a hold of us at 135 South Showman here in Coos Bay, right back past Boom and Wine Empire, right behind the Moe's Car Wash. The phone number 541-888-4660. Give us a call for any of your toolboxes, winches, hitches, bumpers, exhaust, all kinds of cool stuff. We do tons of undercar, lots of brakes, alignments. We got a new guy here named Brad. He's doing really, really great. And Austin, he's on the alignment machine, and he does most of the wiring and all the installs on all the lighting. So give us a call. We got good guys doing stuff and get it done right. And Josh will be the guy to help you find what you want and get you fixed up.
All right.
Oh, and
thanks,
RC stuff too as well. RC stuff. Forgot about that. So.
Oh, definitely. Those remote control cars are cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. You guys take care.
All right. Take care.
God bless America, baby.
I love that. I love the, we joke that, we're a bunch of rubes out here in Southern Oregon. But the fact is, Bob, that the farmers, the ranchers here, the Indian tribes, we've all have developed knowledge from the hard work that we've done. The fishermen who go out, they know where the fish are. They know, because they've been doing it for years. Their fathers did it. Their fathers' fathers did it. The same with the forest, the same with the farms and the ranches. And if they get rid of this, they get rid of a brain trust that they'll never be able to replace. And we've seen this before in history. When Mao had the 5-year plans, he killed the farmers, he killed the ranchers, and he sent college kids out to their farms and their ranches. And within the 5 years, they were starving. Hundreds of millions of people starved to death. And sounds like what they're doing to us.
The Russians called it Lysenkoism, but the same thing. A central government cannot manage local resources. Every time they try, There's starvation. In our cases, we're wealthy enough so that people don't starve. They just move to a sidewalk when they're broke.
Yeah.
Tim made some good points I'd like to follow up on real briefly. The first one, a healthy forest has healthy humans in it as a definition. They've changed the definition to being a bunch of dead trees and a bunch of dead wood on the ground and a multi-layered canopy, which is a scientific way to say ladder fuels. And the forests are burning up as predicted. People are an important part of the environment. He mentioned kids in the forest. For the last 6 or 7 years, our organization, a nonprofit, Oregon Websites and Watersheds, has been working with Southwest Oregon Community College forestry students, taking kids into the Elliot and writing reports and doing research, all of which has been ignored by Oregon State, Department of State Lands, and the State Land Board. Those are the people that are being paid to manage the forest. Those of us that have actually been out there doing the work on it, taking the kids on it, doing the research on it, there you go, have just been ignored. And it's bad enough not having any funding when you're watching millions of dollars being spent and wasted. But the worst part is that you do the work, you do the research, you build the websites, and then they're not even acknowledged. And these people are supposed to be college level researchers. The other thing he said was a snowy plover. And that's a really interesting lesson, because with the snowy plover, they said, okay, it takes a certain amount of space and we'll give it that much space during the breeding season. And so we won't let ATVs and people disturb them during that time of year. And it's worked great. The snowy plover population has expanded. We've done just the opposite with the marble murrelets. They live in the ocean, they eat fish. Thousands of them live up in Alaska. Some of them live off Oregon coast. They live about 12 or 15 years. They don't breed every year. They lay a single egg, and they don't need an old growth to do it on. They can do it on an alder. They can do it on a rock. They can do it on a cliff. They can do it on a redwood. And yet the claim is that scientifically, they require massive amounts of old growth for a few dozen birds that lay a single egg during a known 6-week period of the year. So what happens is they lay the egg in, say, May, middle May. If you know where they're going to lay them, and we do because there's very few of them, then you just don't log there for, if a bird shows, for the next 6 or 7 weeks. Every day the parent birds go out to the ocean, get a fish or two, and they fly back to the nest. They beeline out to the ocean. They've been called Australian bumblebees. They go 60 to 90 miles an hour. So they can get down to San Diego quicker than you or I can do it. And they live down in San Diego. They go into the Midwest. They mostly live in Japan and Alaska. But for that 6 weeks, they're laying the egg. As soon as that bird can fly, it takes a beeline to the ocean and gets its own fish. So it's one egg on a branch, a straight line to the ocean and back a couple times a day. And then after 6 weeks, a straight line out to the ocean. And for the next 10 and a half months, there are no marbled murrelets in the woods. What in the hell are we doing those 10 and a half months for the marbled murrelets? We're putting thousands of people out of work.
Right.
We're creating giant bonfires. It's ridiculous. And the spotted owl, there's less spotted owls now than there was 30 years ago in the Elliot. The Elliot 30 years ago was being clear cut and managed probably too extensively or too harshly, but oh well. And there were a lot more spotted owls there then than now. So since we stopped logging, they're disappearing. But the spotted owl circles, these areas that they create for habitat, they're maintaining those for supposedly 80 years. That's a joke. But they're maintaining those so that the spotted owl can maybe move to those locations. Now, an analogy would be, we've got homeless people on the street. We want to build them houses. So there's 10 homeless people. So we'll build 15 mansions. 10 of the people can live in a mansion. 5 mansions will keep empty in case these homeless people breed and want to expand their base. It doesn't make common sense. It doesn't make any sense. Economically, it's been a disaster. Biologically, it's a disaster. And yet, for a handful of lawyers and a couple of environmental organizations and a few elected officials, it's been a bonanza for 30 years at the cost to everybody else, with the air we breathe, with the money we don't have, with the recreational opportunities that are missing. So it's something that hopefully with the new elected officials in Curry County and Coos and Douglas County maybe waking up a little bit, that something can be done. And the Elliot does represent the state, and it does represent the feds, and it does certainly represent education and kids.
And kids. And, you know, with, I got to spend, it was election night. It was ironic. I had a candidate, but we spent election night, the whole campaign. We all went up to a friend's house. He has a couple of cabins on the I think it was, what's the river? It comes out of Reedsport, Umpqua River, the
Yeah.
South Fork of the Umpqua River, and the mountains. We were in between two, in like a valley between the mountains and stuff, and you couldn't get any cell service, you couldn't get any internet, and I thought, I'm going to take my kids here. I would love to bring them here and get them off. Because I know in the Elliot you can still get cell phone, you can still get internet service, but it would be nice if we could find a way to get rid of that and just have a place where kids can go and learn about nature and have fun time swimming in the streams, hiking, looking at the different animals, and experiencing what we experienced as kids. I go out once in a while, but I don't see as many children out there. And partly, I think because we are an older state, and in Douglas, Coos, and Curry, our demographics are much older. But boy, I wish if I could get some of those kids out of Multnomah County, out of Eugene, to get them out here in the woods to check it out, what's going on, and what's really happening. I think you could open their minds beyond belief.
I just happened did exactly what you described with my two great grandkids. One's 9 and one's 7. And we were down in Canyonville on the South Umpqua and went swimming there. And then we went to South Myrtle Creek and no cell phone service, and went swimming there and hiking around a historic landmark, Letitia Carson's homestead land. So that's been in the last week. And for exactly the reasons you're saying, I like to get out with the great grandkids or with any kids, the SWAC students, and take them out in the woods and have it be a safe place and away from the electronics, and just to enjoy swimming or hanging out or hiking and being, I guess the trite phrase is one with nature. But the point is that a healthy forest has healthy humans in it. That's always been the situation until recent legislation changed it.
I actually think that's a great slogan. Healthy forest has healthy humans. And I think that's because that's what they're really doing, is that and I was joking about people, they're considering people the invasive species, when in fact we are just as natural and part of this planet as anything else, any other creature on this planet. So just by design, it seems like, just by the fact that that's how the plan was laid out, the forest, we have a symbiotic relationship with it, and if you kill that, you kill the forest.
They've turned us into an endangered species, but we're a keystone species, and we always have been. We're the only animal that can start fire, which means gathering firewood. We can hunt systematically. That means affecting the populations of other animals. The idea that somehow nature is going to develop some kind of process that we have to back away and not touch because it will be a lot better for the future. I don't know why that story ever sold in the first place, and now 30 years later they're still selling it. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, that's because they wanted to sell some of them carbon credits. They had to have a good story to go with it, right? Before I get you out of here, because we're gonna, like I said, I want to remind everyone that we do have those public comments are coming up, and that's happening by July 28th, Sunday, July 28th, you have to get those public comments in. And they gave us an email. You're going to love this. They gave us an email, the elliottproject.dsl@oregon.gov. And normally they at least give you a page with some type of little bit of summary of what's going on. And then they tell you, send it to this person and stuff. But no, they just sent out the notice, send it to this email like, it was a second thought, which I think we kind of know it was a second thought. I mean, it was almost like they were annoyed by having to put this in there. Oh yeah, damn, we have to check that box, put in some public comment, throw an email. I bet that email goes directly to the trash bin in the computer. So, but we have to do it because I think if they saw a huge amount of people responding on this, that they would definitely take a look at it. So is there any comment you would have to say for people who want to make a comment?
Well, I'd say one, that it wasn't an oversight on their part. It was a strategic maneuver to get the least amount of response possible. And I do know from experience, whether they have 2 responses or 200 responses, they ignore them. So the email will be gone through by somebody. They will be organized and sorted. That person may want to give a summary or a few of them to the powers that be that we don't know who that is. And they may or may not address them in the plan showing that they did check the box. But yeah, they're starting to have some public listening sessions. These are different from before. I think the first one's on the 15th. That should be right in there, just as much as the email address. We should be fully informed. If they were serious about getting the public involved, they would be hiring people like me as consultants. But no, they don't even. You mentioned my published work, and on the wildlife or wildfire section, Oregon State, after 5 years and millions of dollars, I've written a public report in 1993 on the Elliot plan, on the Elliot State fire history, which is more accurate than the one they have now. I put out a dissertation that's been published on Western Oregon wildfires that includes the Elliot from 2003. And I've written several articles, as you know, for what they would call the gray literature, but that doesn't matter if it's factual. Over a 10 or 12-year period on the Elliot history. They haven't cited any of those. Jerry Phillips and I are the 2, and David Gould were the 3 acknowledged experts on Elliot State fire history. None of us got consulted. When we interceded and gave them information, it was ignored. So they're not doing good literature reviews. They're not listening to expert opinion. They're not doing research that's reasonable. They're doing politics, and they're using old computer models to back up the racket.
That sounds like you said. That's how they play the game. It's like that's what they're doing. I didn't know there was a meeting on the 15th. I didn't see that in the email they sent out, and I'm going to have to go back and look through my emails because I don't remember that being part of the email when they were asking for public comment. They didn't put anything about any meeting. What's the meeting? When is that happening and where? Do you know?
The first one's Zoom at 12:30, I think, or 1 o'clock, and it's Department of State Lands doing the meeting. The last one, there were 2 members of the public. I was one. There was 1 public input. That was me. They tolerate me. I know the people involved, and some of them are really good people, but this is what they do for a living. They don't cut timber or drive a truck. They do law work and planning and computer polygons and that type of thing. Then that afternoon, I think about 5 o'clock or 6:30, Department of Forestry has a second meeting on the same topic. They've got 3 or 4 more planned, and I can send you that information. I would share that widely, and that's where people can get involved and make themselves heard, but more important, learn what is going on in our forests and with our tax money and with our elected officials and in our science education. It's a real chance for the public to become informed. So I'll send that to you. But yeah, I think it was just sent to a small group of people.
Yeah, once again, I'm becoming infuriated because I feel like they're just completely, once again, ignoring us and trying to obscure the fact that there are places where people can have input, and it got veiled. I mean, and I'm pretty good about catching this stuff. So that really ticks me off. You know what I mean? If I missed it, there's no way that people like Tim, who works 60, 70 hours a week, is going to catch this meeting. And not only is he probably not going to attend because it's probably in the middle of the day, like you said, but the fact is he's not even going to know it happened. And that's just sad. It's just sad that this is going on.
Yep. And the other thing is those aren't recorded, but you'll see that they'll record a meeting. It'll be online for 3 or 4 months, and there'll be 38 viewers. And I will be 3 or 4 of those. And probably they are a good share of the remainder. And so the public is just left in the dark strategically. Now it looks like they're trying to open it up a little bit, but I think we've got them against the ropes a little bit ever since Oregon State backed out of it. I think Department of State Lands has bitten off more than they can chew, and maybe here's an opportunity to take advantage of that.
Because that happened the last time I had you on the show, that just had recently happened. Have you heard anything more from OSU on that? Were they, with the state lands, were they feeling apologetic? Were they bringing them roses, trying to woo them back? What was going on? Did anything happen from that?
It's interesting. Oregon State was completely shut out. They weren't even allowed to speak at the December meeting where they were backed out of. DSL is trying to say, we're going to have research. We're going to let Oregon State do it. Meantime, their whole plan, their whole research design was what Oregon State developed. So they're using Oregon State's work and then giving Oregon State an opportunity to be involved. They're doing the same thing with the tribes. There's one tribe that's their ancestral land, but they're approaching 4 or 5 different tribes, and they're trying to tell them that if they go onto this committee and listen to other people talk and have something to say now and again, they're being represented. But
wow,
they weren't represented the last 5 years. It's lip service. So here's an opportunity, maybe with as Tim was saying, as you're saying, as I'm hoping, to finally turn the table on this, that these people need to be exposed and stopped. And again, individually, there's some really fine people there. There's good people. They're well-meaning, but they need to pay the rent, and they do it by filing lawsuits and playing computer games.
Right. And you talked about the computer games. The one girl at the BOEM meeting for the windmills the wind turbines that we went to, she was the environmental expert, and she was in her mid-20s. We asked her how many times does she go out on the water, and how many times, what's her research with the fish and and being in nature. And she goes, I do it all on this. And she held up her laptop. She said, I don't need to go out in the forest. I don't need to go out in the ocean. We all got it right here. And I mean, we all looked at each other and just laughed. It was just, this is who's telling us what's going on. And these are the same people who can't predict, it's like the weatherman. He can't predict what's going to happen 3 days from now, but 3 years, 30 years. We've got projections for you. And you just, sure. So, what else did I have? Something else came to my mind and it just went out, but I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate this. And I will try to be on those meetings. You send those to me. I'll get them out there. I'll post them. And like you said, before the show, I went to the last meeting they had on YouTube because I was searching the Elliot Forest. And like you said, I think it was like 48 views. Nobody was watching this. And so the nice thing is, though, you're going to get more views on this show. You'll get a couple of hundred views on this show, maybe a little bit more, than what they're getting on their meetings that are supposed to be for the entire state. So I guess that's one consolation from it.
Well, I'm not so interested in how many people hear what I have to say. I'm just interested in what can be done about this. The woman you mentioned, that's sickening. That's exactly what's happened in the forest. And the Elliot, when the Oregon State took over, they kept the same two guys working, maintaining the roads. And those guys have been working there since the 90s. And they were expecting bus loads and van loads of Oregon State researchers and people learning about the forest. The person doing the history made an appointment in last January, that he was unable to keep with me and David Gould. 2 Januaries ago. So in a year's time, he was unable to make it out to the Elliot. The bus loads of people. There was a single van show me trip in 5 years from Oregon State. They're not doing the literature review. They're not out in the field. They're playing with computers. They're collecting enormous paychecks from the taxpayers, and they're putting thousands of people out of work and killing our wildlife. That's the historical record. It's all documented, and it just has to end at some point.
I hope it does. And the nice thing is the Elliott Forest, it was here before we were here, and it'll probably be here well long after these bureaucrats have passed on. And hopefully some point between the two, we will have wised up. I don't know.
Next year would be good.
Next year would be good. Well, Dr. Bob, I'd like to get you back on the show because this is a saga that's going to continue. And I have to apologize. I keep spelling the Elliot with one T. There's two T's in there.
Tell you about that. Yep, I was going to tell you about that. That was the first thing I was going to say, and I forgot.
I kept
two T's.
I got a friend whose name is Elliot, and it's one T. But for the Elliott Forest, it's two T's. And I for some reason, I had a mind malfunction and dropped the T off.
That's a common error.
No,
but you're a public figure, so it's good.
Yeah,
good.
I have to have some quality of expectations of having standards here. So I want to thank you once again for joining me. And if you want a copy of this so you can use what you want of it, you're more than welcome. Just let me know, and we'll get you back on. Okay.
Sounds good. Good seeing you again.
You too, and you take care.
Yep.
All right. That was Dr. Bob Zybach. And if you want to find out more, go to www.orww.org. And this is something that's going to be a continuing battle, and I don't know what more we can do. I do know. I mean, if an overwhelming amount of us would actually stand up and say something and make a point of being at these meetings. And I know these meetings, if I had to go to every government meeting that was happening in my area that's just happening this week, I would spend at least 60 hours at meetings. We've been going to the wind turbine meetings because that's the big issue right now. But I didn't want to overlook the Elliott Forest because that's huge. That's a huge amount of money, not just for the surrounding area, but for the Common School Fund. And, we need to make sure that there's money there so our kids are being educated. And we need forests such as the Elliott Forest so that people have places to go. And the fact that Dr. Bob Zybach was talking about how the trails, the biking trails and some of the roads up there were made from trails that Indians had made many, many generations ago, thousands of years ago. That's just mind-boggling. You think about that. You're traveling down a road or you're traveling down a path that people have been doing for thousands of years. That's something that, for Europeans to find that, you would have to go to a European country. You'd have to go to France or England, and our ancestors, mine are from Ireland, But the paths that they took and the paths that are created in those countries, they're still there, and they still get to walk in those paths, and it gives them a relative idea of what history is all about. And we need that in this country. You know, we are the Europeans who came here, because Europeans have been coming here since Europeans existed. But the Europeans that came here to create America, they, you know, we're a relatively young country. We're only 200 and some odd years old, and we have to learn, you know, those basic things that it builds up our culture, because, you know, America has its own culture, and it's made up from a lot of other people's culture that we've have, you know, enveloped. And it's good that you could go down a path that's a couple of thousand years old. I tell you now, I'm going to probably talk to my wife, and maybe this weekend or the next weekend. I think what we're going to do is we're going to plan a trip to the Elliot Forest, check it out and see, because I haven't been there in years. I was there many years ago, and it was funny. We were talking to Tim, and Tim was saying how he hadn't been there in years. And it's because, you know, you get older, you get busy, you get doing things, and, you know, you don't travel any further than the grocery store and your place of work. But going to the Elliot, just going there and being one with nature, as the expression was used earlier, that might be okay. That might be really cool. I'd like to go swimming in a swimming hole down there. You know, and I'd like to go see what's happened with Shutter Creek. I heard that they got robbed recently. Oh, not too recently. It's probably been about 9 months, but they were robbed, and it's a vacant prison. They were going to use that. The OSU, if they took over the management of the force, was going to use Shutter Creek as their headquarters, and it's sad that they shut it down, because the prisoners there were actually being taught about nature, how to care for nature. They were being taught how to fight fires and other vocations that were relative to the forest. And that, you know, it's kind of sad it was being wasted on prisoners, but I'd rather prisoners have that experience and maybe reform themselves. But we need to reform ourselves. We need to get back to this. We need to get back to not just living within our own circle. You know, we got to get out of our comfort zones. We get too damn comfortable living inside. We get too comfortable not going out and exploring the real world. Even, you know, I look out my backyard here. This is one of the most beautiful days here in Bandon. You look at this sunny weather, and that's so funny, because I've been out and about a little bit, and I've been talking to people, and everyone's complaining, oh, it's so hot, we're melting here. And being from the desert, I love it. I love the heat, and I think we've gotten too spoiled, and that's what's happened to us. And now we're paying the price of becoming too spoiled, because that's what happens to people when a group of people get too soft. That's when things go really bad. And that's what has happened with our government. Our government is now able to walk over us because we have become the soft people. We're not the founding generation. We're not the World War I and the World War II generation. You know, and we have no excuses. I'm near 60, so anyone who's 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, it's on us, man. We've done this. We've done this to ourselves. And if we don't pull ourselves out of this funk and start get right with what should be right, we're going to lose it all. And part of that is standing up against the government. And, you know, so many of you came out during COVID. So many of you came out when the government shut down the economy, when they were forcing you to mask, when they were forcing you to take the vaccines. Boy, it was amazing how many people came out and finally woke up. Well, guess what? It's still continuing. It's just continuing on a lower level, but it's a very high importance. Low level, high importance. And you couldn't have anything more important than them putting up wind farms that are going to destroy our fishing industry. Nothing's more important than the government shutting down farms with new rules and regulations and using water as a weapon and destroying family farms, generational farms and ranches, or destroying things like the Elliot Forest. The Elliot Forest is a gold mine. It's a gold mine. And the counties that are in Southern Oregon, and especially on the South Coast, we should be rich just by the sheer fact of where we are. We have some of the best environment in the world, and we should be rich beyond our imagination of wealth, because we have so much here, and it's being destroyed by outside forces. And I think it was Ronald Reagan who said, I'm sure it was Ronald Reagan who said, all politics is local. Well, that's true. So you got to get to those county commissioners meetings. I think, and I didn't tell him, but I'm going to let Bob know that I'm going to send his number over to Rod Taylor. And I told him at the last commissioners meeting, they need to get Bob at the meeting to talk about the Elliot Forest. I think he would be a great guest speaker. We can put him on the agenda. Last meeting we had Dr. Frank on the agenda, did a great job. I think that we should have Dr. Bob Zybach on the agenda at all 3 county commissions. Douglas County, Coos County, Curry County. We should get him on all of them. I'm going to send his info to a couple of podcasters and a couple of radio hosts that I know, because I think that this has to get out. I know this has to get out. And I have a small platform. When I was on the radio, I was probably reaching anywhere between 2,000 to 4,000 people, and 4,000, that was on a good day. Now, I'm just reaching just several hundreds of people, and so it's up to you. And you should share this podcast. If you get a chance, you should share this podcast as far as you can. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel, my Rumble channel, my YouTube, and go check out the website that we were talking about earlier today, the orww.org website, where you can learn all about the Elliott State Forest. They've got a lot of information on there. They've got articles going back quite a few years. And the nice thing about it is a lot of this was developed by college students who are just from a few years back. And so this is very important that we continue this in rural America, rural Oregon, because it doesn't matter where you are in this country, we're all under the attack. And so it's just going to continue. I do have a couple of announcements. Let me add this to the stage. Let me take off that website. The Oregon proposed lease areas. You see those little blue dots in the ocean on the coast of Oregon right there? Those areas are the proposed leased areas that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management want to turn into wind farms. Now, if you notice, those areas are also areas where our fishermen like to go fishing. These are, there's tectonic plates on the ground floor of the ocean, and they want to attach these huge Empire State size wind turbines. They want to attach them, they're floating wind turbines, and they're going to attach them to the floor of the ocean. And then they're going to have these huge cables, these octopus-like maze of cables going all the way out to these windmills and coming onto shore. Can you imagine what that's going to look like? And can you imagine what that's going to do to our wildlife? This is happening on the East Coast. They're going through with those wind turbine projects, and we have a chance of stopping them here. And so there's one thing that we are doing, and that's happening on every month. We've been having 2 Saturdays of every month, where each Saturday we have 2 rallies. And coming up this Saturday, July 13th, high noon at the Coos Bay Boardwalk and Highway 101, we're going to have a Stop the Windmill rally. And we know it's not going to do any good against the federal agencies. It's not like you have BOEM administrators out there going, oh, look, they've got protest signs and they're going to stop us. No, what's happening is that we are making the public aware that this is going on, because number one, a lot of people in Coos Bay and Coos County, they have no clue that these windmills are going up. So we want to make sure that everyone knows, and one way to do that is to have these protests, because boy, I tell you what, you have those big, beautiful signs that we have, and you have at least 15 people holding those signs. People take notice of that, and they go, wow, we want to find out more. And you can find out more by going to the Facebook page that we've created, Oregonians Against Wind Turbines. We have all the latest articles. We post all the events that we're having. And so we want you to come out this Saturday, high noon, at the Coos Bay Boardwalk. And then at 2 o'clock, we're heading down to Bandon. And this time we're going to be on Highway 101 in the Visitor Center, because we were in front of Ray's last month, and they're driving so fast by you on Highway 101 in front of Ray's, even though you're only supposed to be going 45. You're only supposed to be going 45, but these people are flying by. They really can't see our signs. So we got a little bit of protest strategy going on, and we're going to be at the Visitor Center on Highway 101 and downtown Bandon at 2 o'clock this Saturday. And the nice thing about it is there's going to be a lot of very influential people in downtown Bandon, because you know that a lot of very wealthy, very well-connected people love coming out to the coast during this time of year, and they're going to see our protest, and they're going to go, hey, what the hell are these Bandonites talking about? Wind turbines, you know? I feel like the Don Quixote of Coos County. That's how I feel right now. But these people are going to be really upset that these wind turbines are going in, and so we're going to be able to show them that there are people out here who do give a damn, and we're going to give them places that they can go and learn more about what's happening. The Oregonians Against Wind Turbines. And I'm going to post on my website. There is a comment period for the wind turbines as well. And I believe it's for the Federal Registry. I will put that out soon on my newsletter, because I think we have until the end of July to get that out there. And let's see, there is a meeting. There's the Coos County Office of Emergency Management and the City of Bandon. They're presenting "Is Bandon Prepared?" And this is one of those prep meetings. They're going to tell you how to what you should do during a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. This is happening on July 10th. That's just 2 days away at the Sprague Theater. Sprague Theater is at 1202 11th Street. It's in the park, the Bandon City Park. If you know where the barn is, Sprague Theater is right next to the barn. You should be able to know this. And it's happening this, June 10th. That would be Wednesday. And it's going to be starting, the doors open at 6:30, and the presentation starts at 7. You want to learn about having a go bag. You want to learn about having defensible space. All the things that you need to know about natural disasters. I highly recommend you get out there just to find out. I mean, who knows? You know, you got the Elliot Forest and the rest of the forest that no one's managing. We might need to know how to get the hell out of Bandon, or at least bunker down in Bandon if we have those type of emergencies going on. And so that's why I wanted to advertise this, because I just thought, well, it was probably a good idea, because I really don't know how many people have a clue on what to do during an emergency. I do have to give a shout out to some of my sponsors. We were going to play Where's 3H Tree Service, but Matt I think he had already gotten done with what he needed to do today, so we weren't able to play Where's 3H Tree Service. Well, hopefully we'll be able to play next week. But 3H Tree Service, one of my sponsors, if you need to take out any of those problem trees, you got a tree that is hanging over your house, maybe it's hanging over your neighbor's house, and you want to get rid of that liability, well, call Matt Holman at 541-294-1800. Once again, that's 541-294-1800. And you can go check them out on their Facebook page, 3H Tree Service Facebook page, and check out a lot of their videos. They got some really cool videos of Matt 90 feet in the air topping a tree, and you got a view of the ocean. He was just out here in Bandon. He had a job out here, and it's always interesting to see what he's doing, because I'm just amazed that people can do that. I don't know if I'd want to go 90 feet in the air on some of these trees, but he's an amazing person, and so they can take out those trees with surgical precision. 3H Tree Service, 541-294-1800. And of course, Tom and Giggs, we have Tim on here, 135 South Shoneman Street, right behind the car wash, 135 South Shoneman Street. Coos Bay, Oregon, and let Tim know that you heard about it on the Rob Taylor Report. I'd appreciate it, and I'm sure he'd appreciate it too, and he can take care of all those automotive needs that you might have. Herbal choices. For those of you who have some herbal needs, you need some medibles, you need some marijuana paraphernalia, marijuana in itself. You can go to Herbal Choices. They have 5 stores. Great company, great owners. Unlike LaModa, they're not going to give your money to the Democrats, so that's a nice thing. I don't think they're going to give your money to any politicians. That's even better. But Herbal Choices, they have 5 stores, one south of Boundon, one in Coos Bay, they have one in North Bend, they have one in Charleston, and one in Reedsport. All big, beautiful, bright stores, and they're very knowledgeable there if you have any questions. And of course, Oregon Firearms Federation. You know, I was talking about Kevin Starrett and Oregon Firearms Federation among a lot of other groups out there. If you want to give money to a good group, I have a lot of really good groups that come on this show. You know, like Suzanne Gallagher and her Parents' Rights and Education group, or like Richard Burke and his Western Liberty Network group. Well, this one here is the Oregon Firearms Federation. They're the only no-compromise gun group in Oregon. They're a real gun group. You can go to OregonFirearms.org and check them out. Get on their alert page, because Kevin Starrett sends out those alerts to notify people what's going on, what's happening with your Second Amendment. And it's very important, because you need the Second Amendment to protect all your other rights that are in the Constitution and not in the Constitution. And they're not my sponsors, but I like to recommend that if you do want to hone those gun skills, go to Bandon Gun Club. They've got a pistol range and a 5-stand trap. If you want to go trap shooting, go look them up on bandongunclub.org. That's bandongunclub.org, and they can help you out. They don't have a rifle range, but if you do want to sight in your rifle, that's okay. I can take care of you. Tioga Sports Park, which is ran by the Tioga Sports Park Association. Go to tiogasportspark.org. Premier Sport Shooting and Firearms Training Park. I do believe they have training out there, but you can take your rifle out there and get it sighted in. It's 100 yards range that they have out there. It's a beautiful place. I highly recommend it. And those are the things that you can do in the county. And of course, this Friday, I'm going to be on doing the Friday night rant, because, you know, that's what I do. I do a lot of ranting. And we're going to be talking more politics. We're going to be talking about a lot of the things that are happening in the state politically, because, well, you know, you got to be informed, and I want to make sure you know what's happening. And it's hard to keep up with all those news stories. Plus, I know a lot of you, your eyes get tired because you worked all day, so your eyes are tired. You don't want to do a whole lot of reading. That's okay. You can listen to the show. You can watch the show. I like to have a lot of eye candy up there, so that you can see some of the charts and graphs and articles that I'm discussing. And I'm going to try to get a panel of people on for Friday. I'm going to talk to a couple of different characters that I know what's going on. Let me go quickly to my comments. What do I have in the comment section? Let's see, Gary Laundrie, what are you saying? Speaking of the wind turbines, according to the Curry County BOC, Melissa Cribbins represents one of the large corps bidding on the installation of those things. Yes, she does. Yes, she does. Yes, Melissa Cribbins has been paid by, or is getting paid by, one of the large corporations who wants to bring in those wind turbines. And, you know, I'm a big fan of technology. You know, I love new tech. And if those wind turbines actually worked, I'd be a huge supporter of it. I'd be a huge supporter of the wind turbines. I think they're a great idea if they actually produce enough energy to offset what we're paying for it and for the damage that they're doing to nature and to the wildlife. If all of that could be mitigated by the fact that they were creating huge amounts of electricity, I'd be all for it. But everything I've learned about these wind turbines, they're just not worth it. They're just not worth it. They're not They're not economical. They're not wildlife friendly. They're not. They're just not going to work the way that we're being promised to work. And after listening to this story about the Elliot Forest and what the government is doing and how they're lying and covering up things, I don't think I trust the government to run a business. So if the government has to pay for something for some project, I question the validity of that project right off the bat. Always question the government, always question authority. It's the best thing you can do. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in. I hope you tune in for Friday night. I'll be here next Monday. I've got some really good leads to some really good guests to get on the show. And I have another UFO guy who wrote another UFO book. He's considering coming on the show. I thought, what the hell? Maybe I can become the next coast to coast here. I'll find someone who's wrote a book on cattle mutilation, and we'll bring him on too. I don't know. I've covered UFOs. I've covered ghost stories. I've covered Bigfoot. Stan Avery come on here to talk about Bigfoot, and I'm a skeptic. I don't believe in this stuff, but boy, I sure like to hear some of the things that other people do believe. There was a flat earther who was talking about to me who wanted to come on the show, and I might get him on here because I don't know. They always want you to try to prove that the earth isn't flat. And of course, my retort is, well, can you prove that the earth exists at all? And well, and of course we can, but that's the kind of rhetoric you get from people who are like flat earthers. They want you to disprove their point. And so, I don't even argue with them, but I do like listening to the story. I don't believe the earth is flat. I believe it's a big, beautiful blue ball, and we're orbiting a big, beautiful sun. And that's just the way things work. That makes sense to me. The flat earth, not so much. But, I'll try to get those different people on. We're going to be talking more about the COVID vaccines. I've got a doctor who is an expert on the vaccines. And now that we've had them for a couple of years, she was going to come on to talk about some of the side effects, which I don't know why they call effects to medication side effects. If it affects you, then isn't it just an effect? I don't know why they call it a side effect, but that's once again that wording that I just can't comprehend. But I hope you all join me, and I've got, like I said, a big line of guests that I think I'm going to get on the show, and it should be really cool. And I appreciate all of those who tune in. And until the next time, folks, you know what I always say. Carry on, America. Carry on.